Hey, what's up guys? Au5 here. Today I want to show you this really cool technique that I've been playing around with that lets you create your own reverbs as well as other things such as resonators, diffusers, stereo wideners, and even phase dispersers and a couple other cool things. I'm going to be using Ableton, and I'm going to be using the Max for Live device that comes with Ableton called Convolution Reverb Pro. You can use other DAWs. In Logic, there's a convolution reverb plugin called Space Designer. If you're in FL, there's one called Fruity Convolver. And there are other third-party ones. I think there are some free ones too. I'll link those in the description. And basically, the main principle behind this whole thing is you take what's called an impulse response, and you can use that to filter audio in different ways. For instance, a real life example would be if you want to capture the acoustics of a particular room, what you would do is you would either have, you would play a very loud full spectrum transient sound. You could clap, you can pop a balloon. In a professional setting, you would use either an impulse or like a sine wave sweep with a deconvolver. Basically what happens is you are sending a full spectrum transient sound into an acoustic space and then recording that the reflections and the reverb of that room. You can also do this with like I said, like a guitar speaker cabinet. That's how guitar amplifier simulators are able to emulate speaker cabinets from the real world faithfully. So with that principle, what you can do is take that impulse response or the capture of the impulse through that room or through the piece of hardware, and you can take any audio and put it through the convolver, and it will emulate that sound being in that space or through a certain speaker or through a certain hardware. And the cool thing about that is you don't actually need to do any recording or anything to create nice sounding reverb and really cool effects. So I'm going to take you through a couple examples of stuff that I've been messing around with and the really cool effects that can come with that. And some of them are actually pretty useful in the mix setting as well. So, all right, I have Convolution Reverb Pro loaded up, and it's just the default. I have a group with a couple different instruments playing. I'm going to bypass this. I'm just going to play through dry what these 3 tracks sound like so you have an idea. So here's the first one. So they're just simple, really dry sounding loops. And so I'm just putting the Convolution Reverb Pro on the group. By default, it's this default reverb that sounds pretty nice. I mean, not necessarily practical for drums, but sounds nice. So I was thinking, I want to make my own reverb, something that is really transparent and smooth sounding. And I was thinking the best way to do that would probably be to have a sound that is very steady and smooth and plays all of the frequencies in the spectrum simultaneously. So that would be white noise. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to I have an operator here, just default. I'm going to create stereo white noise, just pure white noise. So I'm going to turn off the filter for now. I'm going to go into the oscillator, and I'm going to go to noise white. It's going to play white noise. Let me turn this down a bit. And if I want it stereo, because I mean reverb should in most cases be stereo. It sounds nice and whatnot. So in order to just make stereo white noise, you can just turn on the spread. And when you actually have the white noise, not noise looped, when you have the white noise oscillator and turn up the spread, you actually get 2 separate noise signals. It's not just this a mono noise signal that's being detuned or whatever. So yeah, perfect white noise, stereo white noise. What I'm going to do, I'm going to record out just some some white noise. Here, let me resample this. So I just have a new track and then set it to resampling. I'm going to lay down a MIDI note here. And I'm just going to hit record. Oh, sorry. I'm going to record arm my resample track and solo the operator track, and I'm just going to hit record. All right, so I have this block of white noise. Now, reverb is not just like a block of sound and then it cuts off really quickly. It tapers off over time. So what I'm going to do, I mean, you can do this in operator with an automation, but I'm just going to use an audio clip because it's more universal. So yeah, turn warp on, go to envelopes, and I'm just going to create a ramp down, and I'm going to let's hear that. That could work. I'm going to make it a little bit more curved, so it's more natural. I'm going to consolidate this clip, so now I just have just a nice stereo white noise decay, and I'm going to go into the group, and I'm just going to drag this clip into Convolution Reverb Pro, and it just loads it up like that. And now if I play like this first example, hear that? Here's with it dry. I'll turn that on. It sounds like a pretty convincing reverb to me. I'm also going to turn off all these just to make sure it's the pure dry sound. Let's try it with the Serum ARP. And with the beat. So there's a lot of low end in there because there's no filtering going on whatsoever in the white noise. It's just full spectrum. Let's try something else. Let's make this a little bit more interesting and filtered. So first of all, I'm just going to get rid of this, and I'm going to use the output volume and automate that just so I don't have to do that when we resample in the clip. Cool. So I can use, let's try a high pass with no resonance at a 12 dB octave with a 12 dB octave slope, and I don't want so much low end decaying for so long in my reverb essentially. So I'm going to automate the frequency cutoff. So there is a little bit of lows coming in the very beginning, and then it's going to taper off to just nice highs and high mids. I'm going to curve that as well. And I'm going to also throw an EQ on here, and I'm going to automate a high shelf. So let's try about there. I'm going to turn the Q down. Automate a high shelf. And basically this is simulating dampening, spectral dampening, which you would find in a real space. Yes, basically the lows filter out and the highs filter out, and what we're left with is just like nice mid-range. So I'm going to resample that out. I don't need to crop it because it's already filtered and automated. So I'm just going to drag this in, and let's see what this one sounds like. It's much roomier. I wouldn't necessarily use this kind of sound or this kind of reverb on these instruments because it's still a little bit too just like static and mid-rangey and just not that interesting. It has a nice tail. Also, I'm not really going to mess around with these internal settings too much just because if you're using a different plugin such as like Space Designer or Fruity Convolver, they're going to be different. I do encourage you to check out what the different things do in here. I mean, it has dampening, basically kind of the high shelf and low cut thing that we just did. You can do that in there, but I just wanted to show you how to do it from a more universal approach from the source. Cool. So yeah, we have we have this now. And another cool thing you could try out is making the noise a little less smooth. And one of the ways that I like to do that is just by using the vocoder, just set to noise mode. If you play it, you can already tell that it sounds like a little weird, a little kind of watery. I'm gonna turn the release down. I'm gonna turn the gate up too. And let's make this full range. Let's try this on just 4 bands. You can also bring this down, and that kind of makes the noise more crackly, which could be cool. Let's try this. Sounds pretty watery. Cool, let's resample that. Toss that in here. It's kind of fluttery. Here, let me turn this up more. Let's try it on the drums. That's pretty interesting. You can really hear the original sound in the transients. Let's try something else. Let's try a corpus. Corpus is a certain type of resonator in itself. It emulates all these different physical materials. Let's do string. Let me set this to full range. Let's see what we got right now. It might be kind of loud. So I want more full spectrum. Let's up the inharmonics, turn up the spread. And let's just resample this out and see what this sounds like. Wow. That's really cool. It sounds very like metallic and kind of glassy. So let's automate this tuning and see what kind of crazy effects we can get. Yeah, let's try that. That is really cool. It's like a phasery reverb. But that's like responding to, you can really hear it in the transients, like really responding to the transients. That's really cool. I just want to try this with, I'm gonna try it with a combination of things. Some top end attenuation. Let's flip this flipped. And let's try some auto pan. This could be pretty cool. I'm going to automate the rate on this. Let's turn this up a little bit more. Let's see how this sounds. That is so cool. So like I mentioned earlier, in a professional setting, sometimes an impulse is used to capture an impulse response. I mean, hence the name. It's like an impulse goes out and then whatever the room is responding, you capture. and then that would be the impulse response. So in this case, I have an impulse, and it's just one. It's just a spike. It's just one sample size in length long. It just sounds like a click. And this is perfect because it's the finest resolution and also covering all of the frequency spectrum. So theoretically, if I put this into the convolver, it would sound dry. But you can use this to, I mean, for instance, I can just load up a reverb and just record this. And this will sound, if I put this in the convolver, it'll sound exactly like this reverb. So let's do that. Let's toss this in here and toss this reverb into here. It pretty much sounds identical. There is some limitations with using convolution to capture acoustic qualities of things. You can't capture saturation. It can't like synthesize and add harmonics where there aren't any. It can't do pitch shifting. You can do chorus-like effects, but it's not a true pitch effect. The things you can do with it is capture time data and spectral data. So basically, that's why it's best for reverb. You have the spectral characteristics as well as the time and phase characteristics. But yeah, you can't emulate like OTT with it. You can't do like dynamic-based effects. You can't do any effects that are being modulated, such as like a pitch shifter, or like you can do chorus-like effects, but you can't actually emulate like a real modulating chorus where the delays are moving forward and backward. But regardless, you can still do so many cool things with it. So for impulse, if I wanted to emulate a delay, I'm just going to throw a delay in there. Okay, let's make this full wet and let's resample that. Cool. Now let's toss this into convolution reverb. And as you can see the delay times right there. And I just emulated that delay. I just emulated the default ping pong delay. What's important to note though is because this is an audio sample, it's not going to be synced to your DAW unless you have your BPM set in your DAW to whatever the BPM was when you recorded a delay. If you even care to have a synced delay, I do. If you were to save this, I would suggest saving the BPM that you recorded the delay at, just so you know. You can also add reverb to the delay. So like if you have like a really nice reverb and delay chain that you like want to go to all the time, you can just send an impulse through that chain of delay and reverb or EQs or whatever, and you can record that as an impulse response, and then you can just use that in your convolver, and that's probably going to save you some latency and probably some CPU as well. Let's add, for fun, let's just add a flanger. That might sound cool. Toss this in. That's pretty cool. So yeah, like I was saying before, practical things and stereo widening. So I'm going to go back to operator real quick. I'm going to just record out, let me turn this stuff off. I'm just going to record out a very short just piece of noise. And I'm going to crop this to here. So this is dry. Here, I'm gonna make this mono, so you can hear the stereo effect that this gives. Just widens it right up. And it blurs the transients a little bit too. Let me make this mono as well. Let's try the beat. So it's a little bit short. Let me make this a little bit longer. This can get some really cool diffusion effects. Notice how it lengthens those hi-hats. That's pretty cool. I would probably use this on basses and then automate the dry wet to like emphasize extra space and stereo articulation within the bass. But the cool thing is that it's so short. It's just like a really short block of reverb that you're getting. It's cool because it's like there's really no tail to like interfere with other frequencies if you have like a fast moving bass line or even a synth line. So I'm going to go back to the impulse, and I'm going to try to recreate a couple different stereo widening effects, such as dimension expander and polyverse widener. After studying the waveforms and trying out multiple experiments, I'm pretty sure I figured out how they work, and I want to try to recreate them. So dimension expander works by taking the dry signal, delaying it by a very short amount, and then inverting the phase on one of the channels so it becomes pure antiphase. Basically, if the signal is mono, it will duplicate that signal, delay it in time slightly, and then make it anti-mono or antiphase. Or basically what that means is there is no mono signal. If you collapse it to mono after you invert the phase of one of the channels, it's going to destructively interfere, and it's actually going to be completely silenced. And I find it really useful too, because if you're playing live in a venue, for instance, and the sound system is mono, all of the dimension expander effects will collapse to nothing. It will be as if you bypass all of the dimension expander effects. But the cool thing is, if you're in a open space like a venue, it's going to have its own natural reflections and reverberation, and it's going to create stereo width just because it's being played in a room. So it's a really clever effect, whoever invented that. Widener by Polyverse, on the other hand, it uses a similar principle, but it uses phase rotation in its phased delay. Let's try to recreate that. All right, unfortunately, Ableton just crashed and it couldn't restore the project, but that's okay. I still have my one sample impulse, and I realized the problem was actually Convolution Reverb Pro was acting weird when I was messing with the decay time. So I'm just going to use Convolution Reverb, which is a much bare bones version. Seems to be working better. So I just threw the impulse into Convolution Reverb, and I'm going to just play this synth line, and then turn up the wet. As you can hear, it's pretty much identical. And that's because, as it should be, it's a one sample impulse. So yeah, as I was explaining, I'm going to use Disperser, which is a awesome plugin by Kilohertz. It's definitely one of my go-to plugins, and it is a phase rotator, but uses a bunch of stacked all-pass filters to you can kind of think of it as a spectral delay across a gradient. So if I have it just set in the middle, like 555 hertz, The frequencies above that are not going to be affected. The frequencies below that are going to be delayed, and everything in between is going to kind of be like a sweep between, a sweep through the undelayed and delayed across the frequency cutoff. So if I stack a couple of these, you can really hear it's kind of like zappy, lasery effect. So I can capture this, and then I can toss this into here, and basically just emulate Disperser. That's what 3 dispersers sound like stacked up. But if you don't have Disperser, I mean, you should get it. It's not that expensive. But if you don't have Disperser, another way you can kind of create this effect is by exploiting the nonlinear frequency crossovers that are found within multiband dynamics and EQ3. EQ3, who thought that would be... Why can't I spell EQ3? EQ3, EQ3. Here we go. Yeah, who would have thought EQ3 actually has some practical use? So right now you don't really hear much, but once I start stacking these, you'll be able to hear that effect. So let me record this out. Let's hear how this sounds. Dry. Wet. And it sounds really wet. It's like glossy. Anyway, I love this effect, but back to what I was getting at as far as trying to recreate the Polyverse Wider plugin. In Wider, apparently, there's an all-pass filter, and there is also a little bit of a delay. So I'm going to just throw the delay in. I'm going to make this full wet, turn off ping pong, no feedback. I'm just going to set this to like 20 milliseconds. And also no filter too. But the trick is to make it actually wide sounding is to invert one of the stereo channels. So now if I sum this to mono, nothing comes out. So I'm going to record this. All right, so here's my new wide impulse, and toss that into Convolution Reverb. And all right, let's hear what we got. Sounds wide. Let's put a utility on this and make it mono. Actually, so a little bit of the stereo is coming through. So I forgot a step. I think what you got to do is make the sample mono first, and then create a chain here. So then when I make this whole thing mono, yeah, you don't hear anything out of the widen version. This impulse, I think, is a little bit late. I think I used a little bit too much delay. Let's do 5 milliseconds. Let's record this out. Okay, here we go. And then you would adjust your width with the convolution chain. Sounds pretty good to me. All right, so that pretty much sums up this tutorial. So now you know how to make your own reverb and cool custom effects and diffusers and resonators and all that sort of cool stuff. yeah, if you have any other ideas, if you've tried this out yourself, and if you come up with any other really cool ideas, I would love to hear them. And I'm gonna have links in the description for the one sample impulse, so you can make your own impulse responses, as well as convolution reverb and yeah, the other third-party ones that you can get. If you like tutorials like this, and if you want to see more, I have a full masterclass called The School of Bass, and that link is also in the description. It's got over 25 hours of content. It's constantly being updated. It's pretty much a full sound design course using just Ableton plugins. We also have some bonus third-party plugin stuff and a bunch of song walkthroughs. It's also not exclusive to Ableton as well. Most of these techniques that I go through are compatible with the built-in effects in pretty much any DAW. There's also a free mini course that has a few excerpts from the full course that you can check out for free. Otherwise, subscribe if you want to see more content like this and to keep up to date on all my releases. And yeah, I hope you enjoyed this tutorial. Thanks so much, guys. I'll see you next time. Peace.